Oh boy, I can't wait to play a native port of Resident Evil Village. Ah! This was the life of a Nintendo Switch user for a couple of years there, expecting fun new native ports of big AAA games appearing in their Nintendo Directs, all to just get bombarded with a huge slate of cloud-based versions of these big old games. This was a very unfortunate trend for a couple of years there. Now, it technically started around 2018. I remember news popping up that Resident Evil 7 Biohazard was coming to the Nintendo Switch, and I was like, oh my god! However, it turned out it was only in Japan, and it was a cloud version. Well, what does that mean? Well, a cloud version means the game requires a persistent internet connection. Streaming the game, it's not made for Nintendo Switch. The Nintendo Switch is fundamentally just a vehicle to accept an internet connection where they're beaming the game to this screen. Now, here's my thing. In 2018, I wasn't necessarily looking at Resident Evil 7 and thinking, wow, yeah, that'll definitely work on the Switch. But to be fair, you look at all kinds of other games that were coming to the Switch. Doom 2016, Wolfenstein 2, Overwatch, they got The Outer Worlds, Nier Automata on the thing. Now, of course, just because, oh, this game works doesn't mean that game will work. But RE7 being a 2017 PS4 game, and it also running on Capcom's RE engine, which does work on Switch, I think potentially the Nintendo Switch one could have gotten a port of Resident Evil 7. I don't think it would have looked amazing, but I think it could have ran. But hey, you know me, I'm a gamer, which means I know nothing about video game development. But I sure think I do. But from my perspective, I feel like this was a situation where, yes, you could have created a specific Nintendo Switch version of Resident Evil 7, but the amount of development time that would have to go into a port like that for it to end up not looking that hot, and during a time in which the Switch was still kind of in its early years. I mean, this was 2018, so I think Capcom looked at this whole situation and thought, let's try this and see how this goes. Because, oh, this would have been the perfect situation for them. If they didn't have to actually develop a Nintendo Switch native version of this game, they could just put out a cloud version, and that makes things significantly easier. Because the way these cloud versions work is pretty much there's a big old computer somewhere in the world running this game, and then it's streaming that game to your Nintendo Switch, much like how a YouTube video streams from Google's data centers or whatever to your computer or to your phone. And of course, everybody knows downloading something specifically to your device means you're not going to have any buffering. The quality is going to be a lot better. And yeah, that all still applies to cloud gaming. But around this time in 2018, 2019, 2020, you could tell there was definitely a push towards cloud gaming potentially being the future. And while I think cloud gaming can be very impressive, I do think it being pushed as the future was kind of being pushed by people that I don't think actually really consumed a ton of video games, and they didn't really understand like how video games are played or consumed normally. Because a big problem is video games require immediate input. Even the smallest bit of latency, you can definitely tell, even if you're not a huge technical guy. Playing a cloud version of a game, even if it's like okay, the feel of playing it is a significant downgrade from playing a native version of that game. But I think regardless, pushing us towards cloud gaming has just always been this thing where it feels like, oh, well, this is the natural advancement of technology here, without really stopping to think like, okay, what are we really gaining much from this? Like, cloud gaming is cool. Like, sure, oh man, I can play an Xbox game on my phone. I don't want to fucking do that. That sounds miserable, bro. I'll wait to go home to play my fucking games. However, cloud gaming wasn't really seen as the future on Nintendo Switch. It was seen as, well, this is the best we can do. And I think that was especially noticeable considering one of the big gimmicks of the Switch is the fact that, hey, it's portable. I can take this wherever. These cloud versions of the game is like, oh, well, you can take it wherever there's a persistent internet connection. These cloud versions kind of felt like they were only for people who desperately, and I mean desperately, wanted to play these games, and they only really had a Nintendo Switch, or they wanted to play it laying in bed or something. Where it's like, oh yeah, you can still play these games in handheld mode. You can walk around the house playing them. Just stay connected to the internet. Do not leave the damn house. Weirdly enough, this was really only a Japan thing for that first year. And the only games that really got this were Resident Evil 7. And then later down the line, they actually announced Assassin's Creed Odyssey got a cloud version. But again, only in Japan. That game never got a release on Switch as a cloud version outside of Japan, which I always found weird that these cloud versions were specific to these regions initially. You think with these being cloud versions, there's not really much risk at all with just putting these on the eShop elsewhere. But I do find these versions to be notable in the fact that it does feel like these are Nintendo Switch versions of the game. When you play these games, they have screens that showcase using the Joy-Con controllers. In all the menus, it refers to it as like, hey, yeah, don't turn off your Nintendo Switch console when saving. So it does seem like there's at least like a small amount of development that goes into these Nintendo Switch cloud versions of the games. Like, they do create a Nintendo Switch SKU of the game. When you go on these games Wikipedia articles, you see on the platform list, they all say Nintendo Switch, but I almost feel like you need to say Nintendo Switch and in parentheses, cloud version. Because it's just like, is Resident Evil 7 really on this platform? Because I remember trying out Resident Evil 7 on Google Stadia and Amazon Luna, those cloud services, and those are nowhere to be seen on the platform list here. Maybe because it's not available on Amazon Luna right now, and Google Stadia is completely fucking dead, but still. My point is, I found it disingenuous to claim that these games are now on Nintendo Switch, because, well, technically, yes, they are, but at that point, buddy, you could, like, stream a million different games to Nintendo Switch. Why not do that? Why were they trickling out these cloud versions? Hell, I mean, yeah, you could stream whatever the you want to this thing at that point. Hell, I mean, you could release any game imaginable on Nintendo Switch if you can just use the excuse of it being a cloud version. Why not do that at that point? Probably because nobody fucking liked these versions. I'm not 100% on how well these versions ever did. I think some of them did okay overall, but I do think for the most part this was a failed experiment. Resident Evil 7 and Assassin's Creed Odyssey were like the only games for a bit there that got cloud versions, and even then they were only in Japan. But then in October of 2020, during a Nintendo Direct Mini Partner Showcase, we got two announcements, one right after another, that Hitman 3 was coming to Nintendo Switch, and Control Ultimate Edition was as well. And I can tell what they were really trying to do here. This was definitely seeing how far they could push things, because Hitman 3 was being announced as if this was just like the game was just coming to Nintendo Switch. They didn't make any note of anything. That is, unless you noticed at the very start, there is the little disclaimer at the bottom that a persistent internet connection is required. But for the most part, this game was being showcased like it was just any other game coming to Nintendo Switch, and this was a big damn deal. But at the very end, it says Hitman 3 Cloud Edition. It was coming day and date alongside the other versions. You get Hitman 3 on the PS4, PS5, Xbox, all of that, and the Switch on the same day. Except not really, the Switch was a goddamn cloud version, who cares? But then Control was announced immediately afterwards, and that was available the exact day of the Nintendo Direct. Oh wow! Cloud Edition! Off! Going into the next year or two, cloud versions definitely became more and more frequent. Nearly the entire Resident Evil suite came to the Nintendo Switch via cloud versions worldwide. You got Resident Evil 2, 3, 7, 8, Guardians of the Galaxy. That was kind of a random one getting thrown out there. Now, a funny one was you had Dying Light come to the Nintendo Switch, and this was actually a really good native port for the Switch. But then they announced Dying Light 2 Cloud Edition. And that got delayed, and it never ended up coming out. I gotta be honest, the idea of delaying a cloud version of a game is just really funny to me. Because, like, what the f are we delaying here? How much development goes into the cloud versions of these games? From my perspective, you're just pretty much running a PC build of the game and then just streaming it over to the Nintendo Switch. What gave with that? What went on? I'm sure they just saw like, oh yeah, nobody's into this. Nobody's interested in a cloud version of Dying Light 2. But something that people were interested in, because I do think these games did sell okay overall, were the Kingdom Hearts games. This was kind of informally announced during the Sora for Smash Brothers presentation, where Sakurai said, "Hey, I have the honor of announcing that the Kingdom Hearts games are coming to Nintendo Switch as cloud versions. Hooray." What an absolute slap in the face this was. Felt like Square Enix didn't really have the foresight to like immediately start developing a Kingdom Hearts port for Nintendo Switch. And they were probably like, oh crap, Sora comes to Smash Brothers and we don't have Kingdom Hearts games ready for the Switch. Well, yeah, put out a cloud version of all the games. And that was just lame as all hell. I mean, Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2 are PS2 games. Kingdom Hearts 2.8 was a remaster of Kingdom Hearts 3D from the 3DS. This was a Nintendo game. This was a 3DS game. And they didn't want to go through the trouble of creating a native port on the Switch. They just said, nah, it's getting a cloud version. Kingdom Hearts 3, I would at least understand because, you know, that was a big boy PS4, Xbox One game. But all the other games, man, what a crock. But listen, I get it. Game development is tricky, especially if you need to kind of downgrade a lot of these games to run on the Switch. Yeah, even if these were PS2 or 3DS games at their core, the versions that they wanted to bring to Switch were designed for consoles like the PS4. Albeit Kingdom Hearts 1.5 and 2.5 HD Remix were originally designed for the PS3, but whatever, I digress. You know, the big reason why it was the most disappointing is because the cloud versions of these games, yeah, they ran like ass. Even just playing Resident Evil Village recently, just to test it out on my Switch 2, the cloud version immediately had problems where I could not control it well at all. Like, it was just glitching out. And even playing a game like Kingdom Hearts 3, it was functioning better for me. But still, a big part of what makes Kingdom Hearts fun is the feeling of the combat, that immediate input. It's fun. And then when you have, like, this even slight level of delay between your button inputs and what goes on screen, it tanks the fun factor pretty considerably, which is why all of these cloud versions on Nintendo Switch do at the very least have a free demo that you can download. And they really do push you to do that because who knows what your internet connection is like. It might be great, it might be ass. From my experience though, even if your internet connection is great, it kind of varies from game to game. Like I said, some games I was doing fine in, it was working just okay. But then Resident Evil Village, for some reason, that game was just giving me massive amounts of trouble. But trying another game immediately after that, it worked just fine. So who the hell knows? But you better damn well test things out because you weren't getting any form of discount with these games. A Plague Tale Requiem's cloud version has absolutely no discount. To them, this is worth the same price as the native version on all of the other consoles. The Kingdom Hearts bundle with all of the cloud games is $90 fucking. But you know what? I gotta give them credit because on PlayStation, it's 100. They gave us a deal. Judging how a lot of these cloud versions kind of started to die off after 2022, 2023, I think is pretty indicative of how well they did. Though I do think the Kingdom Hearts games actually did fairly okay just because, I mean, it's Kingdom Hearts. I do recall seeing these games on the eShop's best sellers list, but that could have just been the launch hype of like, oh wow, well, this is the only chance I get to play Kingdom Hearts on the Switch, I'm gonna take it. But thankfully, what we've seen with the launch of Switch 2 is that a lot of these games are actually getting native Switch 2 versions. Hitman 3 and Hitman 1 and 2 came to the Nintendo Switch 2. We also got Resident Evil 7 and 8 on Nintendo Switch 2. Well, Assassin's Creed obviously got a Japanese-only cloud version. Assassin's Creed Shadows came out as a native Switch 2 port within the console's first year. So thankfully, it seems that we're past this point where we have to really worry that, oh, if a game is gonna come to the Switch 2, oh, it's just gonna be a cloud version. Because that was a genuine fear for a bit there. And it's because to a lot of these big companies, it's kind of like, oh, well, let's just try that. It's gonna cost significantly less, and hey, the game is on Nintendo Switch. That means something, right? But it's like, no. It doesn't. Well, yes, these are ways to play these games on your Nintendo Switch. Their mere existence, in my opinion, kind of questions the entire point of owning a Nintendo Switch. It's like, okay, sure, that way I could have played Hitman 3 in January of 2021 when the game launched lounging on the couch. I don't have to play it on the TV, or I could pick it up and walk around the house with it or something. Yeah, sure. But let's keep in mind, that's like the ideal situation. That's not even considering the idea that, like, yeah, it's not gonna run very well. Even though the game is not gonna be downgraded visually to run well on Nintendo Switch, it's not gonna look good. It's gonna look like a fucking 240p YouTube video. Because you're streaming it, and if you're playing in handheld mode, you're not playing in a wired connection. You're gonna have an inconsistent internet connection. And it's just gonna suck. That's the main thing. Every time I've played a cloud version on Nintendo Switch, they function, but that is until they don't. Because all these cloud versions always have hiccups, and they always have problems arise. And it's frustrating because I never really know what to blame it on. Is it my internet connection? Is it the game? Is it the system they have set up to stream the game? That's one of my biggest problems with cloud gaming. For something that's so futuristic and advanced, it sure fucks up a lot, and it has far more room to up far more often than normal native video game ports. But the game's available to purchase on the console. That's all that matters, doesn't it? The fact that you can purchase it on Nintendo Switch. It doesn't matter that it doesn't work very well. The fact is, the game can be played on Nintendo Switch. The full game, in fact, which is why all of these games were oftentimes full price, even though they were contingent on a consistent internet connection, which even if you have the greatest internet in the world, you're still gonna have problems arise with cloud versions. Because even the smallest little hiccup in the internet, yeah, cloud version completely depends on that. Like I said, it's the full game, so yeah, full price, bitch. But okay, even though I have spent a good long while here bitching about cloud versions on Nintendo Switch 1, we're past that point. We don't have to worry about them anymore unless Dying Light 2 actually finally comes out. If that version actually comes out, I'll drink an entire bottle of vodka on camera and I'll play through the entire game in one sitting. Just cancel the fucking game.